This is episode 222 of the VoiceBot Podcast. My guest today is Ryan Steelberg, president of Veritone. We talk AI-based applications, platforms, and synthetic voices. Hello there, VoiceBot Nation. This is Brett Kinsella, your host of the VoiceBot Podcast. Glad to have you back for another amazing episode. Today, we talk AI and turning core technology into applications. Ryan Steelberg has been a tech entrepreneur since the mid-1990s and has had several successful exits. He knows what he's doing from a business standpoint. Many people think about his background as ad tech, but in reality, it has been in harvesting value from unstructured data for the past 20 years. Through multiple tech cycles, he's done it, and today we go deep into several areas that are valuable to have some background knowledge in. And we get a pretty in-depth overview of the first 15 years of ad tech as well, which I think you'll find very interesting. This conversation will expand your knowledge base and your perspective. Hey, a quick shout out before we get started. Nat Like That gave the VoiceBot Podcast a 5-star review last month, saying the show had genuinely useful and actionable content in voice AI. Thanks, Natalie, for that 5-star review. For all the listeners out there that have enjoyed our conversations of late or for many years, I'd appreciate it if you take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. When you do, please make some comments as well. It's great to get the feedback, help others find the podcast, and I'll probably give you a shout out if you want. If you don't want, you can tell me that too, but I'll likely give you a shout out on the podcast as well for doing that. I try to get to those every couple episodes or so. So thanks a lot for doing that, and we always appreciate that. It's a little way you can give back for all of the great conversations we give you, and hopefully you learn a lot each week. I know I do. Also, I know many of you are aware of the Voice AI community initiative called Botcoin. We have a lot of activities about to hit next month, so if you haven't taken a look yet, now might be a good time. For those of you who are not familiar with this, Botcoin is a voice community social token. We're using it for all kinds of things, but think about it like airline miles. It's really more of an affinity activity that we can use to reward each other, to do different types of activities, have a little fun. Voice Lunch is rewarding event hosts with Botcoin. Jovo recognizes contributors to its open source project with Botcoin. VoiceBot's giving away Botcoin to Voice Insider subscribers and some people for completing surveys, for example. There's a lot more bubbling up soon as well. VoiceBot held an exclusive event where we discussed some unreleased market data that was accessible only to Botcoin holders. We did that back in June, and there's more coming up. We're going to do that at least twice this fall. There'll also be some exclusive programming for Botcoin holders at the Voice 2021 conference. Well, I'd say that's enough of a teaser for that. We have more than a dozen different organizations that are using Botcoin and 550 people in the community right now. That's growing very quickly. You're welcome to join, and I think you might enjoy it. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it too. There's no complexity, by the way, like you might typically find with a cryptocurrency. There's no crypto wallets required. And if you sign up for an account, DM me in the VoiceBot community Discord. I'll even send you some Botcoin if you do that before the end of August. Just send me a DM in the VoiceBot community Discord. This is really simple. It takes like a minute to sign up. It's quite a bit different than a lot of these things. It's what they call a side chain off of cryptocurrency. But if you want more information, here's what I would suggest. Go to voicebot.ai/bot-coin. voicebot.ai/bot-coin. If you have any questions, just join our VoiceBot community Discord and DM me. Or you can DM Michael Stanislawic, Dave Young, Roger Kibbe, Pete Erickson, any number of other contributors to Botcoin who have been working with this community initiative. You can also join the VoiceBot Discord at voicebot.ai/discord, voicebot.ai/discord. That's a great way to DM all these people that you know in the industry if you want to get in touch with them really quickly. They're very responsive. I hope to be distributing some free Botcoin to podcast listeners this month, so definitely sign up and DM me your Rally username. Okay, my guest today is Ryan Steelberg. He's president, board member, and co-founder of Veritone, a publicly traded company listed on the NASDAQ in the AI space. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Veritone was founded by Ryan and his brother Chad in 2014, and it represents at least the fourth business they've created together, probably more. The Steelberg brothers have a notable record of successful exits in their career that spans 25 years in tech. In earlier companies, as you'll hear today, they applied large-scale data processing to advertising or ad tech. Before that was commonplace, and were really instrumental in the development of what we now call programmatic advertising. Veritone provides an AI platform called AIware that applies large-scale processing of unstructured data to a variety of use cases that range from revenue generation to back-office operations. And they even do some things around synthetic speech. They have a trove, petabytes of data from media companies and other types of organizations. It's really an interesting conversation. Prior to Veritone, Ryan was CEO of Brand Affinity Technologies, head of radio at Google after the acquisition of DMark Broadcasting, where he was president and co-founder before the acquisition. Earlier, he was CEO of Toucan Media and president of AdForce, another couple companies that had successful exits. You're going to get a lot out of this conversation. Okay, next up, from big data ad tech in the 1990s to AI applications for unstructured data in 2021 and a whole lot in between, let's get started. Ryan Steelberg, welcome to the VoiceBot podcast.
I am so excited to be here. I've listened to a ton of them, and I'm finally thankful that I got the invite. So appreciate it.
Awesome. I didn't know that you'd been a listener before. I never assumed that people have even heard of us.
No, I have. It's anything that says voice and AI. I think it needs to be on the top of my research list. So I'm thankful for you and another journalist really diving into this exciting category.
Well, great. I think it's long overdue that I have you on. And, I think about when I was first introduced to Veritone several years ago, I thought of you sort of in the ad tech space, doing the quality assurance on ad performance, maybe doing some of the asset management pieces where people could go into their unstructured data and their media assets, find the little bits that they really needed and exploit them in new ways. And so over the last couple of years, you've totally transformed. Like I'm thinking back shortly after you were founded, 14, 15, 16, just seeing you guys early on. But it's like an entirely different business now.
It has. It's been somewhat similar to our previous companies where, when you get to a point of scale in one area, at times an opportunity or an inflection point, it presents itself, right? And you can either go after the bigger idea or you and I were talking about it pre-show, or hunker down and just try to own the small TAM, right, that you're going after. This business, right, thankfully, it's kind of organically presented a much bigger, more dynamic opportunity for us, and obviously we've kind of tripled down on that, and we're starting to reap the rewards from that effort.
Okay, well, let's do some backstory here a little bit because this isn't your first rodeo. You've been in the technology space for a long time, mostly around advertising. Why don't we go back to like some of your earlier endeavors around AdForce, Toucan, DMark, any of those, and just talk to me a little bit about what was going on at that time, how you were applying the technology, and then we'll bring that up to where Veritone is and what the tie-in led to the founding of the company.
Sure. Well, the very first business and technology stack that my brother Chad and I launched was actually in late 1993, early 1994. And, quick story is, growing up here in Orange County, California, before we sort of had an emergence of technology and other business segments, it's a real estate dominated area and always has been. Big commercial developers, lots of residential. And my mother at the time was, I'm at UCLA studying, I'm pre-med, right, with a focus on microbiology. And go Bruins, absolutely. And we came up with the idea of trying to port the multiple listing data. For those of us that are old enough, it was a proprietary, right, network system that real estate agents would log in and find out what's on the market. And it's actually, so the precursor before we, any ad tech business that we, very quickly soon after launched, we were one of the very first, we believe the first people to ever port and publish multiple listing data to the World Wide Web. And that we did that kind of during the summer after my sophomore year at UCLA. And what's really interesting is we didn't know what VC was or really the investor community at all. But and so my parents started getting calls from all these different firms in the Valley, and these venture capital companies. And so Hummer Winblad Venture Partners, Ann Winblad, for those who are in the space, knows that was Bill Gates' former fiance for a while, et cetera, et cetera. Her name's come up in the past. More recently now, for some, let's say potential.
But a famous VC in her own right.
Yeah, she's kind of old school, classic. And they came down, met with Chad and I, And they said, hey, listen, we really like what you guys are doing. We would love to help set up a roadshow. And they actually, to their word, flew us up, set us up with meetings to go pitch like 15 different VCs. And when I say pitch, we didn't know what we were pitching. We just kind of explained what the platform was and we were doing. One footnote is our business model was pretty rudimentary. We would charge $1 per listing per year, right? And we would charge the real estate agent, okay? And kind of like a SaaS model. But we had a side technology that we developed to serve ads based upon the type of property somebody was searching for and the price range. All right. And this little nugget of technology, ironically, was codenamed AdForce. Okay. So it wasn't the main business. It was simply a piece of technology, a tag-based ad server, since we were building websites for these, Prudential California real estate and 21st century internet. We were hosting their platforms on different domains, and we needed to figure out a way to be able to serve ads to disparate or third-party domains, right, across a distributed network. And so that's what AdForce was this little piece of technology as part of our real estate business. After that roadshow where Hummer Windblad was dragging us around, we got dozens of term sheets for the real estate business. But what was interesting is the very first group that really came after us, Hummer Windblad, they presented much more attractive terms for the investment to Chad and I if we would focus on this piece of technology called AdForce and potentially divest of the rest of the real estate stuff. And it was very interesting, that going through that. I mean, it wasn't the inkling, it wasn't the passion why we started the real estate business, but we saw with the latest iterations of HTML and the explosion or the ease of which websites were going to be produced. We had just a feeling that advertising and targeted advertising through this new ecosystem, the World Wide Web, was going to be a thing. So, long story, we took the money. I told, with my tail between my legs, I went to tell my parents that I have 10 years to go back to a UC school in good standing. And I said, is it okay if I do not go back for my junior year, just for 1 year, and give this a shot? And growing up in an entrepreneurial family, that was very, very quick conversation, and we got full support from our parents, et cetera, et cetera. So we took the money, and then boom, that was the birth. Now we're really in late 1995, probably right around there. And that was the birth of AdForce. And in AdForce was really one of the very first. It was pretty much us and DoubleClick that became the largest ad tech ad serving companies, ad management firms. AdForce and DoubleClick pretty much owned roughly about 40% of the market of all ad delivery across all web properties for several years. And how we divvied up the marketplace between DoubleClick and their product was called Dart, obviously acquired by some large company in the Bay Area later. But the differentiation was we were pure SaaS tech and no ad sales. So any of the large web properties that had ad sales or felt, frankly, they were good at doing ad sales, the Yahoos of the world, AOL, Lycos, Netscape, they all went with us. On the flip side, DoubleClick, they landed some big accounts, but they had hundreds of websites, because websites don't really care about acquiring technology. They wanted the ad revenue, right? So it was pretty much a neck and neck. We raced through an IPO. We went, through over the next couple of years, we had just massive, significant, triple digit growth for 4 consecutive years. And then we ultimately went public in 1999. And what is interesting is right around that time, our growth rate as compared to DoubleClick's, we flatlined. And there was one major TAM problem. We didn't expand the number of products and services we could sell to the same customer, for example. And there was nobody else to go sign, right? We literally ran out of large properties to go sign. And DoubleClick just took off because the proliferation of new websites came to the market. They wanted ad sales. So it was an interesting, we actually flew under the mantra as a horizontal complementer, right? Let's partner with people. Let's focus on the tech. So it was a great, successful business, but despite going public and ultimately selling the business, in late 1999 after we were public, for a good chunk of change, we were cognizant of the fact that at times you need to be able to go vertical, right? At times you need to be able to take more risk and not just be myopic to try to guarantee success, right, in a more provincial focus of a business model. So despite all that, thankfully, the return on that sale in late 1999, right before the bubble broke, right, and the demise of short term, we were lucky, right? We were able to get out, cash out, give us enough of, a nest egg, and frankly, enough capital to go try do it again, right? The timelines overlap here, and don't want to confuse you or the listener, but as a hedge, because what was happening with DoubleClick, in late 1998, I actually left AdForce, right, as president, and I started Toucan Media, a rep firm. We didn't, because our VC dominated board, right? They knew the straight line track that we were going to an IPO. We had big underwriters and big banks behind us, and there was no way that they were going to disrupt that train to introduce a service side of the business. So I spun off, ultimately with the support of the board and a little bit of capital from AdForce, and I started Toucan. And what I did was I went out and rolled up. I acquired like three other smaller rep firms in the space. Web Reps out of, these are all names that everybody knew in the past, Eisenberg Communications Group, Web Rep, and I actually can't remember off the top of my head the third group I acquired. I rolled them up, and then almost overnight, Toucan became kind of like the second largest ad representation firm behind DoubleClick. It was.
And when you say that, just because I know a lot of my listeners are more technical and they won't know this part of the business, when you say an ad rep firm, you're representing the publishers who have inventory,
correct,
and helping them generate revenue.
And my job is to go out and try to find advertisers and sell it. The technology that our rep firm committed to was AdForce. So we became a great next phase accelerant for AdForce's growth. And in about a year, so right around when we went public, Toucan was the largest customer of AdForce. So anyway, so AdForce went public, and then actually before AdForce was acquired by, there's a big holding company back in the day called CMGI, which you probably know. They were buying up everything back in the day, and they actually acquired Toucan before they acquired AdForce.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that order. I thought it was the other way.
And it became AdSmart Engage, which I worked there for about a year. I commuted all the way to Andover, Massachusetts from Orange County, every week.
Right.
And then ultimately AdForce.
I hope you flew in and out of New Hampshire.
I don't remember where I was flying into, but it was a long haul.
Right. Nice. Been loaded.
So AdForce, that it was an awesome transaction early on, kind of early days. And just a couple of things to point is, and there's been one consistency of everything we're doing, including when we finally talk about Veritone, is everything we do is based upon data, right? It's based upon, when you're trying to figure out to serve lots of ads, you have to ingest lots of data. We'll call them ad requests, right? When people's browsers, right, hit a web page and our ad tags on that page say, oh, don't go back to Yahoo to get an ad, go to AdForce to get an ad, right? And obviously we get presented with a packet of data. And when you add that up across the millions of web pages that we're on, you're talking about having to process just an insane amount of unique and packetized data sets. And then, over time, within a few, let's say 25 to 30 milliseconds, we have to choose the right ad to serve back to the individual, right, and have it resolved on the browser. So we became very good at processing, ingesting large amounts of data and interrogating and analyzing that data, and then making decisions and acting upon that data. Okay, so what I just said right there is pretty much the cornerstone of everything we've ever done. right, in every business. And obviously, it's gotten a lot more advanced. We had basic neural network technology back then. We weren't really using advanced, cognitive AI, as a lot of us we're doing today. But again, it was pretty state of the art, what we were doing. There was no cloud back in the day, so we actually would show off our data centers back in the day, right, and serving ads.
Right.
Yeah. You can actually run we bought Concentric Networks, one of the classic ISPs in the past. We bought their major data center for AdForce. You can run that entire data center on literally a 1U server today, right? I mean, that's how how everything is advanced so much. So, yeah,
sure.
So after AdForce, there was an idea that we had that we never were able to go after while we were running AdForce. Was, could we harness all of the ad management concepts that we were using to serve ads digitally, right, on websites? Could we use and harness that same platform to serve ads onto traditional media, right? Could I build a web-based interface, an ad management system? We'll call it, Trade Desk 1.0 way back then, right? Could I build this, an ad force, but the ultimate ad management and delivery was to traditional linear TV and radio. And that was, it was a concept at AdForce that we had, but there was absolutely no chance that our board was going to let us, again, deviate from our focus. So thankfully, it was an open opportunity, right? We had no IP conflict. And so pretty shortly after, AdForce and all those things wound down, we came up with the idea of, which we called DMARC networks. And DMARC, which is, again, an engineered name for Digital Marconi, one of the classic founders of radio and RF.
Nice. Yeah. I didn't know that.
The only other group, ironically, that ultimately ended up acquiring us was, somebody else who owns the DMARC. The DMARC is Google, actually, which is pretty interesting. But DMARC was kind of ideated to do basically what AdForce did for web-based ads. But could we find a way to dynamically access available inventory, right, through the video playout systems and audio playout systems, right, of traditional television and radio. So after about 6 months of research, and thankfully there, with some just great individuals that we met through our career when we were kind of running, frankly, through AdForce and through our IPO, but we built some good relationships with the precursor to iHeartRadio called Clear Channel. And Clear Channel, the whole LA market, which was, just give you some perspective, the LA radio market is basically the size of all of Canada, right? And so it's by far the largest radio market, dominated by, obviously, everybody driving in their cars back then. Nobody had smartphones yet. So DMARC, what we did is after about 6 months, we had full access to Clear Channel's LA stations. They let us analyze the software platforms they were using. Most of them were analog, candidly. It was challenging to try to look at them from a packetized digital perspective. But we figured out, we came up with an interesting, elegant, yet simple solution to, in effect, treat a radio or TV station just like a website. And so we accessed the inventory logs programmatically from the radio and TV stations, and we then, in effect, allowed us to build advertising campaigns programmatically to fill those avails, right? And actually fill in the slots in the studio automation system, right, with a record, right? Basically what we did, it was kind of a redirect concept. And it was, that company didn't last very long. It went pretty quickly. We started, just after we kind of launched on 4 major radio partners, and it was frictionless, by the way. To just give one clarification, this is not on-demand media, obviously, right? This is one-to-many, right? Proxy-based media, and so the radio groups were very anxious that we were going to cannibalize their primary real estate, right? For advertising. But so what we agreed upon is we wouldn't have access to any inventory until after 6 p.m., right? So when they kind of close their books and they go home for the day.
Yeah.
But it was amazing how much inventory was available, right?
There's a lot.
I mean, it was a tremendous amount. And,
remnant.
Yeah, you can call it, remnant. Now, what's interesting, because we were kind of consolidating all of these avails, right, in kind of a really interesting unwired network, they weren't remnant to us, right? So you could just create your own rule sets and serve it. So, we were really excited. We kind of felt like, oh my gosh, we are onto this thing. And then really probably 6 months after we really launched with a few big advertising clients and a few national ad agencies who started to buy across our the term programmatic wasn't really used then. It was just automation. Yeah. But we kind of think like we kind of built the first programmatic platform for, linear TV and radio. Radio just went a lot faster. We never really got before we actually sold our business, which I'll go into in a few seconds. But we never really even had the opportunity to get going too much on television because things went so fast. So about 6 months again after we launched DMARC, we started to process, big national campaigns. We had two groups, good timing. Entrepreneurs, we all know the woes. You need great timing. You need persistence and diligence. You obviously need technology and great tech, but you also need access to capital, right? And but don't underestimate timing, right? Where are you in that wave? In terms of trend and upload and slope. So Yahoo and Google reached out to us basically almost at the exact same time. I think Chad and I think it was within like 2 weeks of each other. Because these obviously were the two groups that were dominating the ad market for a long time there. And so we called it Project Goyami, right? Google, Yahoo, Microsoft. And Project Goyami was, we knew we created, and we had a ton of IP. One thing we did, which was some people thought we were insane, but to protect our IP for what we were doing in television and radio, we actually went out and acquired the legacy studio automation systems at the three largest ones. So in effect, 3,500 TV and radio stations, literally the enterprise piece of software and hardware we actually bought. Not a great business in its own right, but there was absolutely, in our view, there was no other way you were going to get around this without controlling or harnessing that we'll call that legacy server. So over the next 9 months, we're trying to focus on the business, but it was just kind of getting wooed to sell to Google and Yahoo. And ultimately, Yahoo kind of felt that we weren't, they didn't have our favor. And so it just became kind of a one horse relationship. And then after about 9 months, now we're leading into, 2005. So a couple years have gone by. We ultimately decided to sell to Google. And join them to help them build out, or extend AdWords and AdSense to be able to support delivery to radio and television, right?
Probably DoubleClick as well.
Exactly.
Because ultimately, some of your technology wound up in DoubleClick for publishers, right?
You got it. So they acquired after a pretty long courtship, and we don't like to talk about numbers, but I'm only going to talk a little bit about the numbers of that deal because it's interesting how things change just over, for some entrepreneurs, if you're willing to say no for a while, right? So Google's first offer was like $50 million all in. Mm-hmm. By the time we closed in February of 2006, it was $110 million up front and a $1.125 billion earnout on the back end based upon performance.
Right.
And there's a classic statement that Sir Martin Sorrell, the former chairman CEO of WPP, he called it the mother of all earnouts, right? So we sold, and we became, we were presented on stage by Larry and Sergey and Eric Schmidt at their national sales conference. We were a pretty well-known brand, the ad tech guys. So it was, people were really excited. And that's where the honeymoon ended very shortly. The next year plus was probably one of the most challenging of my career. It was very I think we should have done what YouTube did and sort of demand that we could operate as a kind of a wholly owned subsidiary and maintain operating rights. But unfortunately, we were, for us to get the deal done, we had to acquiesce control, and it was just a disaster. I'm not going to go into too many details, but just, bad decisions were made, and the problem which exacerbated that painful experience at the time was we had this huge earnout, and I had all these other shareholders, which created a brutal, conflict of interest. So anyway, Chad and I stayed on at Google and headed up all their offline ad efforts for about a year and a quarter, and then ultimately we parted ways. So it was definitely not a joyous. It was financially wonderful for Chad and I, our shareholders, ultimately, but it was a very painful experience while we were there. And I think, frankly, Google missed out on some massive opportunities, right? Where, they could have been dominating in the connected TV space and those spaces,
Sure.
Right. So
It turned out all right for him, though.
I think they've done just
pretty
well.
well.
And YouTube, give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I like to say video killed the radio star, right? I think they made the right choice, right? They spent $1.6 billion or something like that on YouTube, and it's probably 10th largest company in the world now.
Well, they probably spend that every quarter just in server costs now, but
it's incredible.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a really interesting background. Okay. So that gives nice context to people here. And so everyone here has learned a lot about ad tech that they probably didn't know. I had a front row seat at some of this in the 90s. I was actually at UCLA and the business school around that time when you were at AdForce and pushing that out. And then you're working in the space in the late 90s. So you were away from the industry for a little bit in terms of day to day for a number of years, probably enjoying whatever you were working on in terms of personal investments and those types of things. But then how did the Veritone idea come up? Was it you saw new technology come out and you say, oh yeah, now we've got something that we'd been waiting for? Or was it just there was a gap?
Well, so the catalyst and impetus was, at Google, while we were still there, we as an industry knew that we had a display ad problem, that we were oversaturating consumers with ads everywhere. And as the proliferation of the mobile device came, where it became harder to give you content and also serve ads around it, like a banner ad at the same time, it became a very disruptive, interruptive based ad experience. When we left, and I think the numbers are just scary now, it was estimated that consumers were being presented with over 3,000 unique ads a day.
Right.
Just crazy. And so we kind of felt that there would be a transition of the type of advertising that potentially would become valuable over time. And this was just, again, it was an idea, it was an observation that we had just frankly from our AdForce days and DMARC days and Google days. But we felt that, we call it different things today, but product placement, native-based ads where the advertising is woven with and into the content, right? On radio, you call it a live read, right? Or your product placements or branded integration, you see the Chevy truck show up in a movie. We felt that was just as a hedge, something that we had to look at, right? Because of the pressures against ads, display-based ads, ad blockers and the like. So that was always percolating in our head. Somebody I actually met during our business dealings with Clear Channel, I was introduced to some gentlemen based out of San Diego that had launched just a boutique little ad agency that was 100% focused on native-based ads for audio, meaning live reads, right? That's all they were focused on. And they had, 3 clients. I think it was like LifeLock, and I can't remember the other 2 names, but LifeLock was the biggest client. And you're right. It was actually legal with Brian Lee and those guys. And they really just became known as working with a big national syndicated radio host and with these guys and weaving in those ads, and they're performing great. So we were intrigued. They were looking to expand. So Chad and I actually invested and ultimately acquired that agency just as individuals. And they were growing okay, but then they hit a wall. And the wall that they hit and they came to us is this advertising is working very effectively. He goes, but unlike spot-based ads, they're like even what we were doing at DMark, we don't know when these ads are actually happening. It's like organic. We can't delineate between the programming and the advertising.
Right.
And obviously you can't close the loop and do attribution or ROI analysis or anything else like that. At least, if you don't even know when the ads are actually, airing or clearing. So that was it. It came to us as, a company that we had acquired and owned said, I have a business problem. And we came up with the idea of, very simply, the problem was, could I ingest, up to 2,000 plus audio streams, right, at the same time? And could I turn that unstructured audio data into time correlated structured data using, right, some form of conversion to, audio to text, NLP, natural language processing, or speech to text? And could I put that into a database structure in a timely enough fashion so we could identify when Rush Limbaugh is successfully voicing LifeLock ad?
Right.
And that was it. That was the very small initial problem. And it was primarily to help one of our investments, one of our companies that we owned, advance. And almost just, it seems, it's hard. I have to, process what, the timeline, but almost a month later, we're like, this is it, right? The concept of, there's so much structured data. As I mentioned in the very beginning, with AdForce is, we were ingesting tons and tons of structured data a long time ago, right? Making decisions ads. But there's this whole new category of unstructured data that, has tremendous value locked in it that, I think we the technology to interrogate that unstructured data that was just getting to a point of competency, right? So that was it. We came up with the concept of veritone, which means truth in the signal, right? So vary the root of truth, and obviously tone is signal. And that's basically what we're trying to do, right? Could we identify, right, and understand what's happening in unstructured data? And signals, as is a classic, military and an intel community stuff. So we were thought it was really cool when, CIA agents are trying to analyze, right, signals, right, and looking for different things. Right. So that's it. And we incorporated Veritone. We merged the media agency with and into Veritone. And then we started to license as a SaaS business, not just, the service of helping them, bring advertising to them, but that we could start offering this solution to bring structure to their audio and ultimately video for media and entertainment companies. And so we launched with just focusing on natural language processing or speech to text. But Chad's brilliant architecture design of really being disciplined, of thinking that frankly all these AI models are gonna get commoditized, right? And there's gonna be dozens of different categories of cognition, object detection, face detection, speaker separation. Really, just the whole category. The big transition that we've been dealing with here in terms of AI machine learning is really transitioning from computational, right, systems and decision making to cognitive, right, decision making and insights. So Veritone in effect became a open platform. We call it an operating system for OS that is really good at ingesting all different types of data. Then being able to use our suite of over 450 different cognitive engines and models to be able to analyze, interrogate, and ultimately empower our business and customers with the tools, applications, and structured data so they can advance their business.
Why do you have so many machine learning models?
Because every job, it potentially warrants a different bespoke recipe of cognition. So if I say, for example, we're presented with Australian English, right? You absolutely potentially want to use a different trained model as compared to global English or American English. And the same can be true for, like, for example, variances in near field or far field audio, right? Throwing one transcription engine against an entire corpus of audio, you will get varying results. And our job is to be able to analyze the data sets and then, in effect, programmatically find and orchestrate the right cognitive recipe to get the best results. And to be clear, I'll give you some examples. The best results is not always accuracy, right? If you're dealing with so much tonnage of data, some projects that we work on, they're okay with 80% accuracy because there's so much volume that they have to meet a price point, right? They can't pay $10 or $15 an hour of content to process it. So, thankfully, that decision of being kind of model agnostic, and being able to normalize the output of these different cognitive classes really was, the cornerstone of Veritone's IP.
Okay, so you've got 350